Hi everybody, it's Wrangler Amiga here. Hope you're keeping well. I've been having fun with Windows. No, not the operating system, but traditional Windows that we have on our Workbench. Why Windows? Well, to answer that question, cast your mind back to some of the previous videos I've done. You will see that I have written various software for the digital signal processor, the DSP chip that appears on the AA3000 Plus motherboard. That's a recreation of the Commodore prototype, the AA3000 that was never put into production. More on all of that in my other videos, but the outcome of that DSP software always ran in an Amiga screen. It took over the entire display. Why? Because I really wanted to get across what software might have come out if the AA3000 had been put into production. But recently, a user called Darren HD, hi to you, Darren, if you're listening, suggested to me, well, wouldn't it be possible, rather than running in a screen, to produce the same output, but put it in a regular Workbench window? So that's what I did. Let's look first of all at the new version of Mandel DSP. If I run it just plain like that in the command line, then it reverts to what it's always done, which is to run in the screen, like I mentioned before. Yes, I have changed the color scheme a little bit to make it look just slightly more attractive to the eye, but that's the familiar program we had previously. But what now? Let's switch back to the RTG screen and extend the command by adding the option on the end -window. And what do we get? Well, exactly what you would expect. The Mandelbrot being generated using the palette for the RTG screen in a window. And yeah, exactly what you would expect. You can adjust the shape of the window, the size of the window as well, to your heart's content, and the image redraws. I can move that behind other windows, and it works exactly how you would expect it to work, all thanks to the OS handling Windows for me. So how did I extend the program to do this? Actually, not too difficult to do. The original program assumed that the screen height was 256 pixels because that was the screen that I'd opened up originally. But instead of hardwiring 256 rows into the program, it's just as easy to turn that into a variable that depends on the height of the window, and then iterate across all the columns in the window as well. And the DSP and the FPU will just as happily work on those dimensions as anything else. Then there's a little bit of maths to convert that into all the different colors that are available to us in our extended palette. So we get the nice shading of the Mandelbrot that you can see here. And just as before, we get a time on the processor that we happen to be using here up in the name of the window title bar. FPU took 1.4 seconds. If I hit the D button, I can tell what the DSP would take to do the same image, and then F to go back to the FPU. I mean, that's exactly how the original program worked. But I did take the opportunity, once getting it all running in a window, just to add a few more little goodies into the package. So what you can do now is hit a number between 0 and 4, and then double click where you want to zoom in. And what that's going to do now is give us that many levels of zoom. So we come in one level, first of all on the FPU, now do the same image on the DSP, and then zoom in our second level of zoom. There it goes, FPU 4.22, and now repeat that on the DSP. And how are we going to do? 4.18 seconds. And then, of course, it zooms all the way back out again and repeats. There we go, 2.61 versus 2.36. And it keeps going ad infinitum. So you can have this sort of running away in the background on your RTG Workbench screen. Not just RTG Workbench, by the way. It could also be just a regular AGA workbench screen as well. I think I limited it to ones with 16 colors or more, just so you get some variation in the picture that it's drawing. But it works just as well on AGA screens or workbench screens. So that can run away in the background while you're doing something else. S to stop that if you want, and then it will, when it's got to the end of drawing that particular scene, it will stop, and then you can carry on doing, look for another region to zoom in on, and off you go. Hours of fun. The other thing I did while I had the opportunity was just to look at the DSP routine itself for doing the Mandelbrot. Let's just get an image on the DSP there. When I looked at the code for the sums behind the Mandelbrot, it struck me that there was quite a bit of optimization that could have been done to the program. So that's what I did. I spent quite some time hand optimizing all of that. So now the inner routine for the DSP to do the Mandelbrot sums is about as fast as I think it's possible to get that chip to do. And you can see that on many occasions the DSP is faster than the FPU. So then we've got 1.89 seconds for this scene, and the FPU 2.2. What FPU is this? Let's talk about that. That is running on my BFG card. So that's the FPU within the 68060 running at 50 megahertz. Perhaps just to be fair to the 68060 for a moment, I haven't hand optimized the FPU code to be just as optimized as the DSP code. Anyway, enough of that. This program, Mandel DSP, the extended version, up already on Aminet if you're interested in that for yourself. But once I'd done that, I was just curious about whether I could do something similar for the demo I wrote, what might have been. And the answer is yes, I was able to, and here it is. Again, this runs in a regular Amiga OS window, and you could put it behind other windows, etc., etc. What you can't do is resize it because it needs the fixed dimensions for the demo to look good. This one was a bit more of a programming challenge to get working because, of course, the original demo was designed for speed and specifically an AGA screen to write into. So first of all, to run it in a window requires Picasso 96, and you need at least a 15-bit screen to run it on. But that in itself presents something of a challenge because behind the scenes, the DSP is rendering each frame to 8 bits of color, whereas the Workbench screen here is in more bits than that, in this case 16 bits. So there's some conversion that goes on behind the scenes to convert the colors of each pixel to the higher bit depth, and then to insert that into the Windows bitmap. All of that takes a little bit of time, so that does affect the frame rate. You can see here I've retained the frame rate counter again in the window title so it doesn't get in the way. You can see we're doing 50 something frames per second at the moment, but this is running still on the BFG 68060 at 50 megahertz. So not the original processor I was using for the demo, which was the 68030 that was on board. Basically, you need more grunt from the CPU to get all the Windows compositing working on the Workbench screen. I also took the opportunity a little bit earlier, in fact, to add a few more effects to the demo itself compared to the version that I have previously videoed on this YouTube channel. What we're looking at here is light sourcing. I realized after shooting that original YouTube video that it would be relatively straightforward to add light sourcing into the engine. So this is a little sequence that just shows that to full effect. And it's also possible to add more complex shapes. This is one I prepared in Blender and then imported into the engine. So again, pretty flexible engine under the bonnet here that could take Blender shapes, obviously with a small enough number of polygons in them to be reasonable, but it can take Blender objects and render them in the demo. So those two effects were showed off originally at the Kickstarter 01 show in Nottingham in July. So any of you who were there on the day might have seen these elements of the demo running on a full screen at that time in Nottingham. But now all available via the window. Again, this version of the demo is already available on AmiNet. And again, you can have that running on your Workbench screen while you're doing other things. And it will, once it gets to the end of this sequence, restart at the beginning. So again, a bit more screen candy to have running away while you're doing other stuff. Multitasking with the rest of your operating system because the Amiga is so cool like that. Right, that brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed what you saw, please do hit the subscribe button and join me for my next video.